The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB-FM. Thank you for listening. It's Hampton Roads Voices, where people speak life into their communities. First, it was driving while black, then eating while black and golfing while black, waiting while black and napping while black. Today, we're talking about hashtag living while black with our expert guest here in the studios and you, our callers. Next, living while black. After this, keep it here on Hot 91.1.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, the new host of the Hampton Roads Voices show. And this is where people speak life into their communities. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be the new host of the show because we're going to talk about issues that affect you and your community. We're looking for solutions, and we are working on making our Hampton Roads area even a better place to live. Today, we have such a pertinent, important topic to talk about. So first it was driving while black, and then it was eating while black and golfing while black, and then we found out it was waiting while black and then napping. And so we're going to talk about the hashtag living while black. Now the phone lines will be open for you the entire show. That's 823-9110. 823-9110. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your experiences, and we also want to hear from our in-studio guest. So first of all, we have Dr. Robert Perkins. He's the chair of Norfolk State University, the sociology department. Welcome, Dr. Perkins.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And then we have Dr. Antipas Harris. He is the dean of the Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. Welcome, Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Benita. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Okay. Now, I want to start out by saying that this is a challenging conversation. And for some, it might be even a difficult conversation. But I must say it's a necessary conversation because of all the situations and scenarios that have been going on lately. We've got to talk about what it means to live as a black person. So, Dr. Perkins, I'm going to start with you. Give us an overview. What does hashtag living while black encompass? What does that mean?
Thank you. First of all, congratulations on your new gig.
Thank you.
And I'm so excited to be one of your first guests. So this is history right here. When they talk about living while black, the hashtag comes from the idea that black skin imposes different experiences than other colored skin. And as such, there's a more negative environment that African American experience different from other races. A lot of times, I would even argue most of the time when these bad and negative experiences happen, we found ourselves at the end of injustices where we don't have justice, even if we were to go through the criminal justice system. And it becomes so paramount and so frequent until it becomes a part of our everyday lived experiences. And these experiences are sometimes not captivated in mainstream America media the way that it should be captivated. So when that is not happening, there's a disadvantage to African Americans. Now, I just want to add, it doesn't matter the age, because living while black is experiences that African Americans experience regardless of the age, regardless of the community they come from, regardless of the class they're in, social class that is. And so there is a connection because of these experiences that all African American experience. Then comes the hashtag living while black. And I know as we go on with the show, we're going to give some examples of what happens when we are just living while being black.
And that's what we mean, just living. And I was reading something and it said, it's so interesting. This really came from Oakland. And I know, and we'll go through all of these. But anyway, Barbecue Becky, when she called the cops. Oh, yes. And you remember that one? And they did all the memes. But it says, unlike the civil rights movement, we aren't fighting for our rights. We're just now fighting for the right to simply live within the law. And I think that is such a basis of what we're going to talk about. So, Dr. Harris, the same question to you. What does this encompass from your vantage point?
Well, thank you, Benita, for the question. I think it's important to acknowledge that while many people may feel that this is a difficult topic, for me, it's not difficult. This is life. Living while black is life. It's not politics. It's not religion. It's not ideology. It is reality. And I don't care how many degrees you have, if you find yourself in a situation where your where you're just assumed to be another black person, you will have the experience of what it means to live while black. And that's a tragedy, and it's a travesty also. So tragedy because no human person should have to live with the self-consciousness of their racial identity. It's a travesty because we claim to be a land of the free, home of the brave, and that is misrepresented by the way that we have to adapt by virtue of our skin color. And the reality is that things are worse now than they have been in the past. Under the old Jim Crow, and I say the old Jim Crow because I don't think it's gone. I think it's still here. But the old Jim Crow, where you had black water fountains and white water fountains, it was actually better. You knew where you stood. You knew which water fountain you were supposed to drink out of. Now, I'm not even sure. I drink out of the wrong one, I get shot. And then everybody else will find out, and I'll be somewhere dead. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is to not know where you stand, but to live into an ideology that is into an ideology that basically demonizes your own people. In other words, many people who are African American who have the advantage that Dr. Perkins and I have, which to some degree is privileged because we are both professors and we bear the name doctor and we actually earned the thing from a real university. And real universities. So we're privileged to a certain degree, right? But the problem is that many times people get in our situation, they become disconnected from the people that they know so well. It's because that even education in our society is such that it disconnects one from the black experience. And I think that that is also a tragedy. When we can celebrate the beauty of America without acknowledging the reality of the ugly of America, particularly here in Virginia. This has not always been sort of romantic story that we tell about how great America has always been. We're grateful to be here, but we have to face the Black Holocaust. And so living while black means that you have to deny the reality of the Black Holocaust that this country launched upon the black community.
Now, that's interesting that you say that, but Dr. Perkins, you also said that it's irregardless of class necessarily and economic status. So are you connecting that with what Dr. Harris is saying there?
Yes, I absolutely agree with Dr. Harris. It's kind of unfair to have both of us on the program because we think too much alike. But he's exactly right. There was a time in our where in American society where there was a bridge between middle class blacks and all the other blacks, where there were a set of African Americans that pretty much divorced themselves from the black community in order to have progress and experience all that America has to experience. And with that group, they thought they were going to be exempt from race and racism. But that really wasn't the case. They actually experienced discrimination, prejudice, and racism, but they experienced it in a different way. For example, if I am a low-income working African American and I experience discrimination, that could mean my life. That means I can lose my job, I cannot feed my children, and so forth. If I'm a privileged, economically, socially mobile African American and I experience the same type of discrimination, I would not lose my job or my livelihood, but my feelings would still be hurt. So the way that African American experience racism, prejudice, and all those things has a different meaning to them based on their social economic standard, but they're not exempt from it.
And so now I see what you're saying. You're making that connection. So we want to hear from you. Our phone lines are open. Our number is 823-9110. We're talking about living while black. What are your experiences here in Hampton Roads, perhaps in other areas? But we want to know what has been going on with you. How do you see this entire movement? Do you see it as a continuation of some of the other movements of Black Lives Matter or any of the other movements, the civil rights movement, Jim Crow, as Dr. Harris mentioned? Let us hear your experiences. Call in 823-9110. We're talking about living while black.
It's Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and welcome back to Hampton Roads Voices. We are looking at such an interesting topic today. Hashtag living while black. Our in-studio guest experts today, we have Dr. Robert Perkins. He's the chair of Norfolk State University, the sociology department. Dr. Perkins, thank you again for being here.
My pleasure.
And then we have Dr. Antipas Harris, the dean of the Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. Thanks again for being here, Dr. Harris.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, we threw out a question, and we have some callers on the line, but the question was, what are your experiences with living while black? We're doing this overview. We're trying to see what does it mean to really walk, live, breathe, work, play as an African American, as a black person. And so we are looking to answer those questions with our in-studio guests and you. So we have a couple of callers on the line. Let's go ahead and go to our phone lines. Again, the number 823-9110, 823-9110, hashtag living while black. Is our caller there? Hello.
Hey, how you guys doing today?
Oh, we're doing great.
Well.
What's your name and where are you
That's
calling from?
great. My name is Latrice. I'm calling from Portsmouth.
Okay, Latrice, what's your question or comment or your experience?
I just have a comment, and I'm listening to you guys about how racism hurts. It doesn't matter if you're poor. It doesn't matter if you're middle class. I work at Norfolk Naval Shipyard, and racism is so huge there, guys. Y'all wouldn't even believe. You could take a white employee at an unsatisfactory level, but some way, somehow, somebody in that white community or that white manager is gonna reach his hand out to that white employee that's performing at an unsatisfactory level and see him as just needing help, versus a black person who's performing at an unsatisfactory level. They're gonna look at him like he doesn't deserve to be here. He's taking his job for granted or for jeopardy. And they don't think about the odds that we have to beat on a daily basis. They don't even realize in order to be black to make it at the shipyard the right way without somebody handing you something, you have to work 10 times as hard as a white employee. And it hurts, and it's really not fair, you guys. And I just wanted to kind of give my little input on that. Yes. And it's just, it's 2018. I'm 36 years old. When I first came into the shipyard, I've been there for almost 15 years. I heard a lot of the older mechanics talk about how they remember colored being above the bathroom, above the bathroom walls, and how the water fountains were separate. And at that time, I was just very thankful because I was like, thank God we don't live in those times anymore. But 15 years later, we're still living in those times. It's just a little bit more hidden, but it's still there. It's still very, very bad in the shipyard.
And Latrice, I could hear that in your voice. I could hear the frustration actually in your voice.
It is.
And you're saying 2018, wait a minute, that's not my mother's time, my grandmother's time, and we don't expect that. And yet
we don't expect it.
It's there in our faces. Dr. Perkins, Latrice's question and comment and experiences.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Latrice for calling in and being so brave and bold in articulating the real issues that are out there when they deal with race and racism.
Right.
And Latrice, this is so fascinating because I was just in a conference in New Orleans, and the conference was about something irrelevant or not related to race. But the race component came up because guess what? It was a black presenter. And it always happened. And as I listened to the presenter, I remember saying to them in the audience that was there, and I said, it's so fascinating how he got relegated and marginalized because of the color of his skin. If we had a blind conference and they didn't know what color the gentleman was, the questions would have been different because they were different to every other person that presented in that particular session. But my point is, Latrice, your feelings are real and they should be validated. And there is studies that are just starting. It's a new line of studies that's talking about PTSD when dealing with racism.
Right.
And what they found is the same type of emotion and trauma that African Americans or Latino Americans experience from racism comes out in the same type of traumatic ways that people have experienced war. And
it makes you look crazy. They will label you as an angry black person because you're not being treated equally, and you're aware of it.
Correct.
That's the part that hurts the most. And to know that the racism is so bad to the point where you might need that helping hand, but because you do have some white management that will extend their hand to the black community inside the shipyard, but then they're considered the token black person.
Exactly.
But that token black person is designated to keep all the other black people in line. It goes right back to the Willie Lynch. And we're still living in those times, those 400 or 500 years where they devised this plan that will last all the way up until 2018, and it's still being shown to the point where your own people will be afraid to help you because they will jeopardize what was given to them by a white person.
Absolutely.
You guys, it hurts. It hurts.
Latrice, thank you so much for your call.
Yes, thank you, Latrice.
We have another caller. Caller, your name and where you're calling from, please. You're live on the air.
Yeah.
And where are you calling from? And your name, please, if you'd like to give us your name.
My name is Ernest. I'm calling from Portsmouth.
Okay. And what was your first name again, please?
Ernest.
Anna. Okay. And what's your question or your comment? What are your experiences?
I'm like, how do you fight racism in the workplace when the system is just against you? I've been to court before, and nothing happened. I had a case with the Virginia Employment Commission, and the case was accepted, but it was sent to Carolina. I mean, they really did much of nothing. They didn't even interview me, but they had talked with the company.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to let Dr. Harris take that question. Dr. Harris, what do you think?
Well, Ernest, it's very nice to meet you over the air, and thank you for calling in with your question. You're correct. Racism is a reality, and part of the challenge is that, as I articulated earlier, that there is a misunderstanding or refusal to engage conversation because many people believe that to say racism is an excuse rather than a reality. And I think the part of the challenge that you're facing is the culture in which that has been anesthetized to the problem. And part of a part of that challenge is that when we have conversations about racism, many times, as our previous caller was trying to explain, that when a person has a weakness on a job and that weakness is used to penalize them, when really underneath that is a deeply rooted unwillingness to support people based on their race, and equally as whites are often supported with their weaknesses. I think part of the challenge is that part of my recommendation is to connect yourself with organizations that are responding to these problems. The earlier caller, part of my challenge, part of my sensitivity is that she named where she works, and I wanted to say to her that if you have any backlash by telling your story of living while black, you need to surround yourself with people who will respond to these issues. Because, and I hate to say it, but in the way you talk about how white employers would support white employees who have a weakness, we don't always do that as African Americans. We need to listen and believe your story and also support you during the process. You shouldn't be going to this listening or this conversation or this court by yourself. You need to go with the support group and people who understand systems and can speak to the problem. Otherwise, you just get lost in the cracks.
All right. Thanks so much for that call. We have a couple of other callers before we go to break. Thank you, Dr. Harris, for that. And thank you so much for calling. Again, we're talking about hashtag Living While Black, 823-9110. What are your experiences? What does this mean to you? Is it just on a national level, or do you have experiences here in Hampton Roads? We have another caller on the line. Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from, please?
Juan Stewart, Suffolk, Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Juan, what's your question or comment?
Well, my comment is, first thing I want to commend you what you're doing today. But 30 years ago, this wouldn't happen. It'd be on the radio, wouldn't be talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact that what you're saying is true about people, our own people, trying to get ahead and not look back in the community or turn their head when they see things that's going on. That's where we're at today, why we're in the situation we're in. We can't afford to do that. Because eventually, it'll get to you.
Mm-hmm.
It'll get to your neighborhood, it'll get to your job, And it's already bad, so we have a system that's designed not to work for us. The courts, the laws, is meaningless when it comes to our rights. They don't mean that we have to accept that. It just means we have to have our own strategy. We have to stop doing the things that don't work for us. And we have to pull together as unity.
Right.
Whether you live on this side of the track or that side of the track, if we pull together, we will be strong to what we are today.
Juan, I like that you say. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Excuse me.
Go ahead.
I like that you say you're talking about strategies. We've got to pull together in strategies. And Dr. Perkins, are you seeing that that is an important piece in this entire conversation?
Oh, absolutely. I think Juan nailed it, and I appreciate Juan for calling in. Going back to the previous caller and then merging it with you, Juan, that's exactly what we're talking about, strategies. For example, if you're experiencing racism on the job in an organization that you feel that is bigger than you are and maybe you're not being heard, documentation should be the first thing that you do. Document. Document the experience, document the time, the day, and what happened and whether or not you seeked a resolution, and if it was ignored. You got the EEOC, and you have civil rights attorney in the area that you can reach out to. You have a strong NAACP. So those organizations that connected have strategies already in place. What they need from you is to reach out to them when you're in those situations and bring them proof that you're experiencing what you are experiencing. In terms of the historical value, as you indicated, Juan, we have to look back and see what worked in the past and see how to elevate it. The problem is that people continue to do the same thing every year, every day of the year with the same marching, the same words, the same everything. But this is a new time, so we have to have a new combat spirit. We have to have new innovative strategies. And let's not forget the almighty dollar. We have to stop purchasing from organizations that do not treat us as equal. And one of my mentors, Dr. George Jackson from Iowa, once told me, he said, just because you're a minority, you do not have to accept minority status. And we have to relegate that. We have to make it real, and we have to push forward together, as Juan has indicated.
Absolutely.
I'd like to say two things. One is that this is a reality, but we can't only do it by ourselves. There are white people who want to be a part of the fight, and we need them. There are only 12% of African Americans in this nation, maybe 13. But our problem is a huge problem, and it's hard to believe we're only 12% of the population. That's one. The Hispanic community, we need the Hispanic community because this immigration issue is a repackaging of the same problem that African Americans have had to deal with. The other thing is I want to speak to African Americans who have some level of privilege. The two callers earlier talked about how there are folks who are assigned to oversee the pack, if you will, and many times to protect their own interests, they oppress their own people. Black people have got to stop oppressing black people, and black people have got to learn to speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. And the issue is that I like to address is it's easy. I mean, when you're fighting for equity, you have to be willing to make a sacrifice. I mean, I've had to make sacrifice in such a way that I've been invited and uninvited to be on university board of a majority white university. I've even Christian context where we have predominantly white. Let's ask Dr. Harris to pray. Oh no, don't invite him. I don't care, because you got to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves and fight against oppression, even if it costs you opportunity, because the only way we're going to overcome this situation for the next generation is we have got to be willing to stop living in this uncomfortable position and acknowledge that this is life.
Dr. Harris, thank you. Juan, thank you so much for your call. We have one more caller on the line before we go to break. Caller, what is your name and where are you calling from, please?
I'm Norfolk.
Mm-hmm. And what is your question or your experience? Caller?
I was going to discuss how I've had experiences on both sides of the fence, dealing with people that look exactly like me and dealing with people who are different.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying just in so you've had some of the same experiences with African Americans as you do with people from other ethnicities and so forth. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh God, what is your name, may I ask?
Jolene Hassel. Is this Dr. Harris?
No, Perkins here.
Harris is here, though. I'm right
Okay.
here.
Hi, Dr. Perkins. This was a perfect opportunity for me to call in because I actually was one of your students in my undergrad, Dr. Perkins.
Oh.
And Dr. Harris helped influence my decision to go to Regent recently.
Oh, wow. Well, Dr. Harris did a bad thing. I did a good thing.
No way.
Well, it is awesome to hear from you again. Thanks for calling in. And I appreciate what you said, because one thing I've always said, Jolene, is that we have to pay closer attention to the agenda rather than the color of the person that's trying to assist us.
Absolutely.
And just because someone share your complexion does not mean they share your agenda, your concerns, or even your same perspective.
That's right.
So we have to go beyond skin to really get to what we need to. And I just want to also back Dr. Harris on what he said about not trying to go it alone. And I think we know that, but it is so pivotal for us to keep reminded, because our white brothers and sisters sacrificed and died and did all of those things. And sometimes we don't share that information. And so we just kind of capsulate it on what the black bodies went through. But there were some other bodies that went through a whole lot for us to be able to have this privileged life that we exist.
Yeah, and sometimes it's worse for white people because they're being treated. The folks who were speaking up, they were treated in a way that the black people, and they have this experience that they can't talk about it being racist, because who's going to believe it, right? Mm-hmm. But it's a reality. You know, when you step on this thing is hot. This is hot territory. You step your foot on this race thing and you come on the black side, oh, sisters and brothers, if you white, Lord have mercy, people would throw you under the bus. I've seen it. This is not a hyperbole. I've seen, white people be niggerized because they speaking for the black man situation. So I have great respect for white people who are willing to embrace the fight. And I want African Americans to know that we cannot sell out because we have a margin of privilege. Because at the end of the day, guess what? Me and Brother Perkins, we black.
Yes, we are. And I just want to say one thing before you hang up. I want to congratulate you on completing Norfolk State and going on with your career. And if there's anyone out there in the listening area, see what we do at Norfolk State. Come on.
Absolutely. Jolene, we thank you so much for your call. We're going to take a quick break right now. But again, we're talking about the hashtag Living While Black. Call in with your comments, your questions, and your experiences. 823-9110, 823-9110. This is Hampton Roads Voices, where people speak life into their communities on Hot 91.1.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, the host for Hampton Roads Voices, and this is where you get to speak life. You, our listeners, get to speak life into your communities. We're having a lively discussion here. We're talking about hashtag Living While Black, and we have two expert guests here in our studios. We have Dr. Robert Perkins, who's the chair of Norfolk State University, the sociology department. Dr. Perkins, thank you so much for being here again.
You're very welcome.
And then Dr. Antipas Harris, who is the dean of the Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. Thank you, Dr. Harris.
It's a delight to be here. Thanks for having us.
And, of course, we want to hear from you. Don't forget, the phone lines are always open here during the show. The number is 823-9110. 823-9110. Tell us about your experiences. So we've been talking about what it means to be black in America and to live with our skin and our experiences and those kinds of things. But we've heard the word at least 3 times, strategies. You've talked about, both of you, about how we cannot do this alone and how we need other communities, other groups of people, as well as our own group, to help us go through this. So in strategies, but, in all the things we've talked about, the Waffle House situation and the group of black women in Pennsylvania who were golfing and were asked to leave the golf course. Of course, I'm sure many of our listeners have recently heard about Rosanna Barr's tweet and all of those situations, and I know that we have probably heard a lot about that. But we know also one of the major ones was Starbucks. And we also know that this week they had some sensitivity bias training. But I'll start with you, Dr. Perkins. Is it too little, too late?
No. And if I thought that, I would be out of a job. So I definitely don't believe that. As a matter of fact, I actually do those implicit bias trainings for organizations that are experiencing racial bias on an everyday occurrence. And what Starbucks did was to bring in a trainer and have, several trainers actually, and have a dialogue and conversation about race and how to treat customers equally. I think it was a 2-hour training. I definitely would have liked to see a more extravagant training, but I'm happy that they did something and they acknowledged it and they moved forward with trying to correct the behavior because this is an organizational issue. And when your organization doesn't respond the way that it should in a fair, unbiased manner, it becomes important for the organization to take the next steps to make sure that all of their customers are treated well and equal. Implicit bias is the idea that bias is actually embedded in the policies, in the procedures, and in the everyday actions of an organization. And because a lot of times only one particular perspective is utilized to create policies and procedures, it lends itself to inequality against marginalized groups, for example, or women, for example. And because of that, the organization can actually exhibit sexism, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, and all those type of phobia and isms because they haven't had a diversity of opinions, perspective, and knowledge to help build the structure of those organizations. So that's why it's very important to have those types of training. But don't stop with just training the employees. Look at the policies and the procedures.
I think that's an important point there because if we don't start from the top, as it were, and start with that conversation and look at what is going on, what is perhaps causing or fueling the employees, managers, supervisors, and so forth to act in that manner, then a problem is there. So I appreciate you saying the implicit biases. Dr. Harris.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Perkins is correct. I think that's part of the issue, though. And it's an important part, the procedures and policies, which tend to cover, or say, for instance, when some of the police shootings, police were not indicted because of certain policies and procedures that covered them that were certainly not sensitive to diversity. On the other hand, we have a human problem that goes back to the way that when black people came here. We have never, as a theologian, I use the word repented, if you will. We have never really dealt with the problem that black people have always been considered less than human. The whole idea of race itself suggests that black people are not human. So even today, that sort of is ingrained in the culture where when you see these things play out, like at Starbucks, at one level, we do need sensitivity training, but you shouldn't have to train a person to treat a human being like a human being, except for the fact they don't really think they're a human being anyway. So the way that people are treated in many cases that we see, calling people on the golf course, those are animals out there. They're not even considered equal to their humanity. So they're treated as such. And the policy won't change that. It can cover it, or it can call it into question or penalize it, but it can't change that human idea that you're not a real human being.
Well, I know we have a caller calling in. We want to get to that person, but I just want to say I never used the term sensitivity training. I'll tell you why I didn't.
Okay.
Because I don't need you to be sensitive to me. I just need you to know that I am here and I have a different thought pattern, I have a different perspective, and the skin that seemed to offend you, I love it.
Right.
I don't need you to be sensitive to it. I just need you to acknowledge that we're in this together.
Right.
That's all. You know, it just, that sensitivity thing, I think that it's improper. It's almost saying that I am going to tolerate you. And you know how we all feel about that term, to be tolerated. And sensitivity lends itself to that. So thank you for what you said.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. We have a caller on the line. What's your name and what city are you calling from?
I'm calling from Elizabeth City.
Okay. May we have your name, please?
My name is Javaris.
Javari, what is your question or comment, please? You're live on the air.
My comment would be that, unfortunately, in this day and age, it is over 140 years since, the slavery ended. It's pretty much the case. People want to be indifferent and ignorant because it gives them a feeling of I got to say, egotistical power, to feel superior. They don't want the feeling of someone of merit. In so many cases, being superior in the fact of doing what they were supposed to. They don't want to, have that feeling inside themselves. Or if they're at that same level as that person, they don't want to have that feeling of being equal to that person by acknowledging them as being the same because that person accomplished the same as they did. They want to still objectify that person by, in this case, race. In other cases is gender. Any way to make that person feel less than them so they can feel superior.
Javari, thank you for that comment. Dr. Perkins.
Yes. Javaris, I really appreciate that comment. As you know, I'm a sociologist. And as a sociologist, we argue that race is actually not a biological construct. It's a social construct. So what you're saying is absolutely true because there's a power dynamic that goes along with race. And you did a wonderful job at acknowledging that in your comment. And what I mean by social construction and not being a biological construct, when Bill Clinton was president of the United States of America, he gathered together all the great DNAists. And that's the term I'm using. I don't know what they're, I think they call it genealogists. And they took DNA from all different groups of people, all racial categories. And what they found is after they did the testing, the difference among the groups were 0.00001. 0.00001. So in other words, there is no difference. So what we have done as human beings and as structure in society is apply power to those that are look a certain way. So if you have a certain skin color, if you have a certain nose, if you have a certain gender, if you live in a certain area, and we said these people are the crust of America, so therefore they deserve more power, more resources, more education, more income, more all of those things.
Exactly.
And we have created the division of race based on a social concept rather than a biological concept. So when we're out there in our society and we're saying that black people are not equal to white people, or we're saying Latinos are not equal to Native Americans or so forth, that is not by design. That's not by God's intent. That is by man's intent. That's a social construction. And the power entity of it is based purely on greed and not anything else other than just people being mean.
And if I may add, I had a grandfather who was really knowledgeable. He said if a skunk walked by you and it sprayed you, would you be shocked? I said, and he said you shouldn't be because if you know the nature of a skunk, that's what it would do. So if you're around someone who you can feel that ignorance and you see actions of how they behave and say things, you shouldn't be surprised whatsoever. And at the end of the day, it's a case of us not looking at each other based on skin color, but as people. But there's those that want that power, so they'll try to, in so many ways, stain or bring it to other folks to try to make them have the same viewpoint of mine. And my finish my call is a case where the brain, when you have issues of racism and sexism, is a disease of the mind from believing you're superior, you're better, you should be able to do this to this person because, I feel this power. And it is also a disease of the heart because you feel that way. So a lot of people say, well, you teach somebody how to not be that way. You still got to get over the fact of how they feel. And a lot of folks, and we're seeing it now, the way they voted and other things, they feel more emboldened.
Right.
They'll come out and let it be known because they're like, I'm tired of suppressing my ignorance, my indifference, because I want to feel powerful over you.
Right. But Javaris, I just want to add one thing to what you're saying because you're making some great points. But yes, you're correct about the feelings and the perspective, but that turns into reality when it's embedded in the system and in structures of power. You understand what I'm saying?
And that's what
Oh,
you
he's
had
gone.
mentioned that before. Jabari, thank you for your call, calling from
No problem. You have a good day.
Thank you for calling from Elizabeth City. We have one more caller on the line. Hello? Would you turn your radio down? Hello? Would you turn your radio down just a little bit? This is Hampton Roads Voices. Okay. What is your name, please, and where are you calling from?
This is Tracy from Norfolk.
Okay. What is your comment or question? Tracy, what is your...
I wanted to, I just wanted to speak very briefly that I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to listen to a conversation about what it's like to live all black. I'm a white person who's been an activist for some 5 or 6 years in anti-racism, and I'm very committed to helping bring other white people to a greater level of understanding of things such as how we're not very safe to talk to. We often, challenge a person of color's perception of whether a thing that happened to them is racism, because we don't, we'll not forget why. We just do, and it makes us very unsafe to tell the story to, so therefore we don't know the story. And being able to hear from folks talking on this show is speaking freely without the detriment of having a white person be part of the conversation in the show really allows people freedom to speak freely. And for me, it's great to be able to hear. And I think people who look like me are beginning to hear what it really means to live all black. And I'm grateful that you're talking about it.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Tracy, for being a part of I call a fight or strive toward a better society. It is important that we partner with the white community and that we seek better relationships. I think that it has to be clear that the fight for equality or equity is not a fight against other people. And that when many times African Americans speak from an emotional place, it is translated often as a fight against another group of people. But it is a reaction to the feeling that the black community has been, that there's war against the black community. And this is what I believe has been inflamed even with this administration. Not listening. Black people have not, for the history of America, been able to tell our own story, except it is being met with some sort of discomfort or shutting off, or black people just talking to black people. But if we can find a way to tell our story, although it is emotionally charged because it's pretty deep, but in a way that the white community would listen and not feel that it's a personal attack, but it is a historical struggle. And it's one that I think in order to get a better day in the future, we have to really work together and understand that white privilege is a reality, and that to say that white people have white privilege is not an indictment against the human persons. It's a society that is shaped such that even my own privilege is underprivileged. When I was in college, there was a white guy who was in the 9th grade and dropped out. He was a vice president of a company. And he said to me, Antipas, you're smart. You really don't need that college degree. I said, oh, brother, you don't know who I'm really. I mean, you know me because we cool, but ain't no way I dropped out in the 9th grade and going to be the vice president of somebody's company. I mean, you are privileged by virtue of being white. And if people can understand that, and even me, who is a privileged black person, is underprivileged because I'm black.
Tracy, we appreciate your call. Thank you so much. Dr. Harris, it's so interesting that you talk about privilege, because I was reading an article and it said this. I'm going to quote exactly. It says, have too many whites grown up with the rhetoric and orientation of racism, and it clearly caused them to embrace the notion of the privileged class. They've grown up with the rhetoric and the orientation of racism. Where does this privileged class notion come from, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, the language of privilege is, of course, socially constructed, but it's explaining the reality that a person who's white can enter into a class situation of a person who's white, and if they have the right appearance and the right way of talking, they can completely disguise themselves and they could live in an underprivileged condition. but by virtue of being white, they have access to the conversation. They're not looked on differently. I walk in the room and have to earn the right to even be included in the conversation. I mean, this happened as soon as last night. I'm like, it's amazing to me how this works, that I have to make my case that I belong here. And a white person, just by virtue of being white, can easily walk in a room and just be automatically accepted. It's a social reality.
Yes.
Dr.
And,
Perkins.
thank you. I experienced the same thing. I'm not exempt because I have a PhD and I'm a sociologist.
And you're going to have to prove you got a real PhD and somebody didn't give it to you because they just need another black person to have it.
Correct. But but here's the thing. I look white on paper. When people look at my resume and my career and where I went to school, other than the fact that I did my undergrad studies at Norfolk State, everything else will probably dictate that I am not who I am. And I remember being awarded for scholarship to Iowa State University. And when I got there, I went with a master's that I earned from here at Norfolk State. When I got there, I was with colleagues who came straight from the undergrad program into the program. And we were all given assistantships. When they got to me, they said, we just want you to sit in the lab. I said, sit in the lab? These folks got teaching assistantship, research assistantship, and all these other things. But when it came to me, they wanted me to sit in the lab. And I said, well, I don't know anything about computers. And he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he said, the rigor of work is different here. And we want to make sure that you have enough time to keep up with everything.
Because you're kind of slow.
Right.
Because you're black.
But you know what they thought? And I often say this. They thought when they recruited me to Iowa State, they would just get my skin color. They didn't know they were going to get all this blackness. See, I didn't leave behind the music I like. I didn't leave behind the food I like. I didn't leave behind my perspectives, my ideology. I didn't leave behind the lessons I got from NSU. I didn't leave any of that behind. I brought it with me.
Right.
And I always say, and I appreciate Iowa State for this because they have worked hard to incorporate African Americans into the mainstream system at that university. But I always say, and this is very true, and you can ask anybody there too, I always say Iowa State is a different institution because I went there. And I am a different man because I went there. So when we set aside all of these notions of what race is and what black is and what white is and move beyond those structures, we can accomplish anything in American society.
That's wonderful. Let me tell you my little story. All right. So I went to Yale. Yale Divinity
I went
School.
to Yale.
No. I mean, this is a point. You haven't seen Yale in the news lately? The black girl who was up there, who the white girl called on because she was sleeping. Yeah, I mean, that's not new. But Yale had this culture of that kind of stuff. And when I first went, they had that culture, and we were reacting to it from a systemic level. And I remember once I graduated, I still stayed in the area when I was working on my doctorate from Boston University. I was writing back in New Haven. So I wanted to get involved in the way I am involved now in the community, and I reached out to the youth. And one young lady, her name is Brittany Luxo. She's married now, a Gibson. And she was working with me to help the inner city youth. And because I had gone to Yale, I wanted to expose the youth in New Haven to the finer things in life. So I wanted to use the theater there on a Sunday evening to do a youth show. I'd done these before, and I wanted to go back to my school and do it. On a Saturday night, I'll never forget, I got a phone call from the police department, lieutenant, a black guy from the black lieutenant. It's just Antipas Harris. Yes. He says, I'm going to need you to shut down the show you're going to do tomorrow night. That's what he said to me. I said, huh? What? Yeah, I'm going to need you to shut this down. This is Yale Police. So the issue that I'm trying to explain is that even that on paper I look white as well. My name even doesn't give away I'm black. So in situations like that where I end up in environments where others might not have the opportunity to end up in, what you discover is some of these environments don't really want your people to be there.
But
and
they
so,
want the color, though.
right. Yeah. The color, they want the good ones. And if you know what I mean. So, but the problem is that those of us who have the opportunity to experience the finer things or the privileged situations, we cannot afford to disconnect ourselves from those black kids who they didn't want on Yale campus. And if they had dealt with it then, they wouldn't have to deal with it a few weeks ago when that girl and that police went in there. I thought to myself, it's still going on.
We're going to take a break in just a moment, but again, you're listening to Hampton Roads Voices. We're talking about the hashtag Living While Black. We want to hear from you as well. 823-9110, 823-9110, Living While Black.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
Welcome back to Hampton Roads Voices. We're talking about living while black. Our in-studio guest experts, Dr. Robert Perkins. He's the chair here at Norfolk State University in the sociology department, and Dr. Antipas Harris, who is the dean for Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. Gentlemen, we've had a lively conversation.
Yes,
we've looked
very
at various
delightful
scenarios. We had some excellent callers talking about their experiences and their questions, but because we also don't want to just talk problems, let's talk solutions now. Let's see what can be done. We know the situations that are going on, but Dr. Harris, I'll start with you. Give us some solutions. What can we do?
Yes, thank you so much, Benita, for the question. I think that it's important to understand that change can happen, and that the optimism we need to translate to practical actions. One of the things that I've done is I left a tenured position at university to launch the Urban Renewal Center, which is a partnership with the First Presbyterian Church of Norfolk, which is a predominantly white church that want to be part of the solution. Our vision is to awaken society to its promised wholeness. We believe that there is a wholeness that exists. And frankly, I do believe as we look into the community, and this has been sort of nodded at by sociologists, that any unit in the community that can effectuate change that we need has to be the faith community. And so I believe, I believe in the power of the faith community. I believe in the call of the church to respond to the issues in our community. And the Urban Renewal Center has a mission to engage the faith community, to awaken the community of faith to understand that our call is both within the walls and outside of the walls of the church, to engage the police, to engage the public schools, to engage other units in the community, to help the universities, to help to mobilize our resources to transform the community, not just in moments of high intensity, but as a long-term project, if you will. So for us, it's important that we engage the three publics: the faith community, education, and the community at large. So society, the church, and the academy. And so the Urban Renewal Center has initiatives that we are engaging to address those issues.
What can the educational institutions do?
The educational institution has a wealth of information to continue to impart knowledge and to also maximize pedagogical skills that are not just European, but find ways to engage the minority community, not just by getting them into higher education, but mentoring them through into graduation. That's one issue. Number two, like Dr. Perkins, sociologist has a wealth of empirical knowledge to bring to bear on conversations. Right now, we got a lot of people in the public square giving their opinions about stuff. But when you have evidence-based information, it concretizes the validity of the problem so that we can both respond to it from an empirical place, but also be inspired by our faith, be inspired by our desire to see change. But the education community is the bedrock for understanding the problem and mobilizing us into a place of transformation.
Now, Dr. Perkins, what about peaceful protest? Of course, we know Black Lives Matter and we know the living while black and so forth. even in the news lately, NFL and their peaceful protests, is that still viable? Does it make a difference?
I think it does. All the empirical research argues that peaceful protests actually garners more response and better response than violent protests. And also, when we talk about violent protests, it's usually the black bodies that end up laying in the streets. So that usually doesn't work out well for the victims, and also for society. And in this case, I'm talking about the criminal justice system. That give them an opportunity to say that, yeah, you may have been a victim, but now you're a perpetrator. Peaceful violence, on the other hand, speaks volumes. And a lot of people frown upon peaceful protests because they say that's the old way of doing things. This is not Gandhi years. This is not King years, blah, blah, blah. And they have a point in the sense that it has some historical value. However, that value remains a part of the fabric of society that we need to hold on to and relegate until we get to where we need to go. So I honestly endorse peaceful protest.
I mean, the evidence is in the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? I mean, we had 50 guys in the NFL who had the president all out there.
I was just getting ready to go to that. Dr. Harris took me there. I was just getting ready to go there. But look how they treated Kaepernick.
Horrible.
This man lost his job over peaceful protest.
And we don't need to be silent.
We do not need to be silent, but we do not have to be egregious either. We don't have to be egregious.
Right.
But what we have to do is start standing up. Everybody has a responsibility to lift their voice. Everybody has a responsibility in your own organization, in your own communities, in your own home, in your own churches to do something to move the conversation and the needle a little bit further. Even with this new, protocol that the NFL put out there from,
they're talking about the racist policy?
Yeah, but what is his name? Goodell. Yeah, Roger Goodell.
Total racist.
I mean, the thought.
The idea is racist.
No, that's Harris over there. Don't try to get our voices confused.
No, that's.
Dr. Perkins, go ahead.
But the whole idea that they would say, stay in the locker room if you want to do a peaceful protest, that relegates African America back to the early 60s when we were invisible. So do what you want to do as long as you don't disturb the very fabric of America, as long as you don't interrupt the organization, as long as you don't cost us money. The thought that that would actually be a policy that is accepted by the largest organization and arguably the most profitable organization in America's society is an abomination of the very culture that we call America.
Absolutely.
So what do you think the players should do then? Abide, obviously, because of their situation?
Well, I don't think the players should do anything. I think everybody else in the society should be doing something. Why are we leaning on those players to sacrifice their livelihoods and everything that they have in their bodies when we're sitting back and not doing a thing about it? We need to do something about it. Yeah. We need to say, we're not going to show up for the games as this is how you're going to treat my brothers and sisters. We're not going to buy the products that are being advertised as this is how you're going to treat my brothers and sisters. I mean, this is the closest thing to modern day slavery in the public view that I've ever seen. And so we cannot just stand by and allow that. But it don't just need to be black people saying we don't need to do. We need white people. When I said we, I mean we as Americans.
Oh yeah,
not we as black Americans. And we need, by the way, we need to get beyond that as well.
Yeah,
because for example, what happened in Charlottesville?
Right.
They were accosting our Jewish brothers and sisters.
Right.
They were spewing hate to them. And we went in and we said, no, hate against any group is hate against all groups.
Exactly.
But the thought that the leader of America would say that there are good people on both sides or fine people on both sides is very disturbing. That gave the gravitas to white supremacists. And now we're seeing it play out in the NFL. And you have to remember, NFL has the largest platform that any organization in America. So that's what I'm saying. Those players might not have to do anything. As a matter of fact, I think they've done enough, but the rest of us need to put up the mantle.
That's right.
So where else can we find peaceful protests? You say that you agree with that, but any other venue, place, Dr. Harris?
Well, I mean, anything could turn violent. I don't think that most of the protests that we've seen over the last few years was intended to be violent protests when it first happened. it turned violent because of one thing or the other. Dr. King says, though, that violent protests is the spoken voice of people who don't otherwise have a voice. So while it's not necessarily violent protests, I don't advocate for it, and I think that it's not productive. It does make a statement of the underbelly of society, just tired of being treated as if they don't have a human. They're not human. Black people, too oftentimes, are not treated like human beings. I see it. And the thing is, we can talk about Philadelphia. We can talk about these national stuff. I don't need all of them to prove. I don't need those national things. I lived black all my life. My whole family, all my brothers and sisters, all 8 of us black. So the thing is that we have lived and adjusted to it so much and tried to finagle it, and don't say nothing because that's going to work against you and it's going to distract you from the bigger issue that you have. But it's a reality. And so for me, when you ask the question about what's peaceful protest, well, let's go back to the NFL. When you got white America saying, no, don't protest like that. Let me teach you how to protest us. That's the niggerization of the black man. And we cannot be afraid to say it. Too oftentimes we can, and then the president gets on television and say they sons of bees and rewrite the narrative the way they want it. Let me tell you this. Black people fought for a country that did not fight for them. So to then turn around and say these black players were not being patriotic is an assault to black community. Black people in the South fought in the Confederate Army against the North when the South was fighting to keep them oppressed. Black people have fought for this country when this country didn't fight for them. And it's happening again where now they want to rewrite what it is that Kaepernick was trying to do and say, oh, he was disrespected. Listen, you can't rewrite the narrative and ignore the reality of black suffering and all at the same time hold up other people's suffering. Today, for example, is the last day of the anniversary of the bombing of Tulsa, the black Wall Street in Tulsa in 1921. Today is the last day of the United States launched a war on black America. So to ask for peaceful protest, I think we have to say that if you want to learn what peaceful protest is, ask the black people, because we're the only one who've been able to do it.
We're going to take a break in just a couple of moments, but again, we want to hear from you. This is Hampton Roads Voices. We're talking about living while black. Call in and give us your opinion and ask some questions. We're listening to Dr. Robert Perkins, chair of Norfolk State University in the Sociology Department, and Dr. Antipas Harris, who is the dean of the Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. 823-9110. This is Hot 91.1.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
Welcome back to Hampton Roads Voices. I'm your host, Benita Adams, and we've had a tremendous opportunity to talk about living while black with Dr. Robert Perkins and Dr. Antipas Harris. Gentlemen, we've talked about problems. Now we're moving into solutions. And Gandhi, of course, said, be the change you want to see in the world. But what about confronting our own implicit biases? Dr. Perkins, you said off air, you said our own stuff. How do we confront our own stuff to make this work?
Yes. If we expect others to eradicate bias in their thinking and their perspective, we also have to recognize that we're coming to the table with a lot of stuff as well. We come to the table with our own biases. And in order for everyone to meet in the middle and come up with creative ways to move forward so we all can have a better, more healthier society, we have to acknowledge it. We have pain. Others have pain. And the only way to deal with pain is to put it out there. So we cannot expect people to come and empty themselves and become completely transparent with all of their issues and ideas and perspectives and wrongings and writings and all that good stuff and bad stuff. And we sit back and hold all of our stuff in as if we never had a part in anything. We never did any wrong. So that's what I mean. If you're going to come to the table and expect others to come, we all have to put our stuff out there so we can deal with it.
So I can hear someone maybe saying, oh, you all are just so sensitive and always the race card and always finding something. What about that?
Well, I love when people tell me that. You know what I tell them? I can only play the cards I'm dealt. So if you want me to stop playing the race cards, stop dealing them to me.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Dr. Perkins. I also think, though, we have to understand that humanity is broken and that even people who we would designate as privileged are also broken. And the race issue in America is everybody's problem, and we all are victims of the problem, just in different ways. And particularly as I think about the urban context where you have both rich and poor, out and in, educated, uneducated, when I look at the situation, I see people who are up and out and people who are down and out. You might be rich, but you might be rich and crazy. You might have access, but you might have addictions. The issue is that when we look at people, we only look at what we see as something that we need. And I think we have to look at humanity as humanity and that we all are broken. So this is why I think this needs to be an integrated conversation between the black community and the white community. And we also need African Americans who have been dealt the cards of not only living while black, but also disproportionately, particularly in Norfolk, black people live beneath the poverty line and need government assistance in a different way than white people. Now, because there are a lot of white people who are finding loopholes and taking advantage of the government. So this whole idea that black people somehow abuse government, that's not even true. Anyway, that's beside the point. The point I want to make is that in order for us to arise above whatever mediocrity in which we find ourselves, we have to get out of the survival mode and understand that we can thrive. And we can't thrive by ourselves. We need somebody else, and that somebody else may be black, and that somebody else may be white. And that goes for black people and it goes for white people. We need each other.
So how do we start the conversation, Dr. Perkins? How do we get started with this again?
How do we get started? By talking. The history of America shows that America has never, ever had a real conversation about race. We've never, ever really dealt with it. We have ignored it. We have fought over it. We have exercised it. We have academicized it. We even built a whole pedagogical theory around it. There are several theories around it. But when it comes to the whole structure of America, we have never done it. The closest that we came to dealing with the race issue as a nation was one with Barack Obama when he did the race speech. And the second one, and we almost was there, and that's Hurricane Katrina. Those two events prompted so much discussion that led all the way to almost through, it reverberated through every organization and every institution in America. And we even had for the Katrina event, there was a symposium set up and it was canceled a week in advance. I don't know if y'all remember that. And we almost had that talk. And, you know, one of the things I want to say is with that Hurricane Katrina, it unearthed all the dirt that America had been hiding dealing with race. All of it. It came out. It came out. But we retreated. We didn't deal with it. We didn't handle it. And so we need to start talking. We need to have honest and candid conversation. But
not just among ourselves, though, Doc. We got to talk.
Well, I told you before, when I see stuff like that, I'm not just talking about black people. I'm talking about all Americans.
Yeah.
We need to have that conversation as Americans, all Americans, but we also need to have it in a structured way. We don't need to have a free-for-all because also what I said off air is we cannot continue to compare miseries. We have to move beyond it.
So we have to realize that it's not everyone else's fault, but we have our own responsibility and how we see it, our own stuff, as it were.
Yes.
And to really reach out to all communities and have a conversation. Dr. Harris, the conversation.
Yeah, I think the conversation we got to move away from party politics and politicizing the conversation, and acknowledge where the lived reality is. And we have to all acknowledge that some of the crazy stuff, not fake news, but comes out of this president's mouth, only perpetuates race problems. And, you know, and some of the other folks that feel like they have the freedom to say some negative stuff like Roseanne did. And we have to condemn those statements. Just because you might support this president, you can't uncritically support this president. We have to be critical about racism, period. There is no excuse, and we have to have a no tolerance policy.
But if we have a no tolerance policy, doesn't that push us into the realm of denial that things are happening?
Well, I mean, the conversation, but I mean, when people are dead, I mean, that's the kind of no tolerance policy I'm saying, or people say dumb stuff like equating, everybody in America ought to know you don't call a black person an ape. I mean, you just don't do of anything I mean, we went through this with HM, put that ape thing on it.
Right. And LeBron James went through it on the cover of, I forgot which magazine it was. I think it was Vogue. Well, I don't want to say the wrong name, but wrong magazine. But the no tolerance thing kind of bothers me. And I tell you why.
Right.
Is because even if they don't say it, they still believe it.
Right.
And they're still saying it behind closed doors. So the conversation that we need to have is those behind closed doors issues.
Yeah.
And so this is, and like Valerie Jarrett said, this is a teaching moment.
Yeah.
Roseanne exposed those behind the closed door conversation that she probably had with folks in the White House. And so those are the conversations that we need to have. So that's what I'm saying. No time. Let's talk about it. Let's deal with it. And let's not hide from it, because I understand that I'm coming with my stuff as an African American, and I understand that you're going to come with your stuff as others. But these marginalized groups cannot continue to exist on the outskirts of America, keep continuing to build up the underclass American society rather than being embedded in the social systems. This is why they can say, okay, get rid of them. Or for example, the 1,500 children that has been taken away from their parents, you know, as immigrants, you know, these are the conversations we got to have. And then you have the Attorney General of the United States of America make statements such as they're not going to have them back. That's their fault for coming. So America needs to really deal with these issues of race.
Because it's being recycled over and over and over again.
Correct.
And that's what I'm saying. We need to be sensitive to this immigration issue and stop making it just the Hispanic people or the Latin American problem. This is our problem because we live in this stuff.
Right.
And just because it's not in my back door right now, oh, brother and sister, it's coming around.
Yes.
And so the thing is, we have to be in this together.
We have to be in it together, and we cannot forget that our brothers and sisters, where we had 4,600 to pass away in Dominican Republic. You know, these are the issues that I'm talking about. And you know what? And I'm a venture to say this, and that is, I'm starting to wonder if we're recategorizing race again.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we are. And what about Puerto Rico? And the president not treating them like they even one of our country. So the point that I'm making is,
I meant Puerto Rico, not Dominican Republic.
But Puerto Rico, yeah, you're talking Puerto Rico. So the point that I'm making is that if we don't keep crying loud, I mean, the scriptures teach us to cry loud and spare not. You know, show the people their sins. And so we have got to cry aloud and keep crying aloud, because if you don't, the thing is, it will be suppressed, like the history of Virginia that has been racist at its core, and it's going to be suppressed, or we're going to end up in a situation where we're going to be in an echo chamber talking about our own problems and nobody else would understand what's going on. But once we come out of these echo chambers and expose what the problems really are across the aisles, and I don't mean political aisle, I mean racial aisle and cultural aisles, because in another 20 years, we're going to have a minority-majority country, and if we don't be careful, we're going to have a civil war.
And we know that we've started some of that conversation here on Hampton Roads Voices. We've been talking about living while black. And gentlemen, thank you for your input. We've been hearing from Dr. Robert Perkins, the chair here at Norfolk State University, the
thank you.
sociology department.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And Dr. Antipas Harris, who
Always
is
the
the
delight.
Dean of the Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. Thank you so much, Dr. Harris.
Absolutely delighted.
And thank you for calling in.
And congratulations to you, Benita Adams. This is your first show, and you did a great. You had me to deal with, so you did a great job.
Thank you so much. Quickly, Dr. Harris, do you have any contact information in case someone wants to
Absolutely.
contact
Please
you?
reach out to me. You can email me at antipas@theurcnorfolk.com. Follow me on social media at DRANTIPAS, at DRANTIPAS. That's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I want to hear from you.
And Dr. Perkins, any contact information?
Yes, you can reach me by email at rkperkins, RKPERKINS @nsu.edu. Again, I'm the chair of the sociology department at Norfolk State. We have 3 degree programs. We have the undergrad program in sociology with 4 concentration tracks: criminal justice, family studies, demography, and social justice. And we have 2 master's program, urban affairs and criminal justice. So take a good look at our department and come to us.
Absolutely. And again, I am your host, Benita Adams, and this has been Hampton Roads Voices. We appreciate you so very much. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, and also remember, we're here every Friday, 5 to 7 p.m., and this is where you speak life into your communities. The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB FM. Thank you for listening.